I didn't know who the president was. I knew what month it was, but I couldn't say it. I tried to say March and it would come out May. If I tried to say 2022, it came out 2002. Like, I could not get the words correct. I started thinking that I was having pregnancy brain. When I was diagnosed, I was exactly 20 weeks. They didn't know if I would actually survive the pregnancy.
Caroline blamed her first symptoms on pregnancy and stress.
I was a massage therapist, a yoga instructor. I had my own business here in the neighborhood for 10 years. I thought, a little bit of stress maybe.
But her symptoms intensified.
I taught a class of students, about 30 students. My words were stumbling. And I knew something was wrong because I went to read my own book that I made for the course, and I couldn't read it. And I was able to perform the physical part completely, and that's all I did for the rest of the class for 2 hours. And I could respond, but I had a slur. And I went home and I actually Googled brain tumor while pregnant.
Caroline went to the emergency room. An MRI led to answers and more questions.
One of the residents came and he was excited because he was like, "Oh my gosh, they just found a mass on your language center." And I was excited at first because I was like, "Oh yeah, validation that this isn't just me like having a mishap." And then I was like, "Well, what kind of mass is it?" And so it was a big mass right on my language center, but they didn't know what it was because I was pregnant. They could not give me an MRI with contrast. Is it a brain bleed? Is it a stroke? Is it a tumor? And so I actually stayed in the ICU for a couple days, and while they tried to decide whether they could do a awake craniotomy to see if they could get a biopsy. The problem was they were afraid that the blood had already coagulated inside my brain and they would not be able to get a good biopsy. My ability to speak was already going down, down, down every day. And, they gave me the option to either try the awake craniotomy, knowing it may or may not work, or come back in 3 weeks, go home, go to speech therapy a couple times a week and see if it was a stroke, come back in 3 weeks and see if they can do something then. And I chose that option because I just wanted to go home. I was doing the speech therapy and feeling good for a couple days, and then it started going downhill really quickly. And my husband took me back to the hospital. And so that was only a few days later. It had nearly doubled in size. By the time I get in, I didn't know who the president was. I was not able to understand. Like, I knew what year it was, but I couldn't say it. I knew what month it was, but I couldn't say it. I tried to say March and it would come out May. If I tried to say 2022, it came out 2002. Like, I could not get the words correct. We're here now. Let's get it taken care of. It's going to be fixed. Like, we can fix this, and I was still hoping that it was some sort of, so they were, said it could have been a hemorrhagic stroke. I'm still hoping for that because I'm like, I can live with that. I can do, I might not be able to talk again, but like I could live with that. And they were also thinking it could be some sort of bleed. And I was like, well, let's go in and fix it. I was just very optimistic.
After an emergency craniotomy, Caroline was able to speak again.
Not like the best, but to go from being able to not speak to like speaking again, I was so excited. And that's when they brought me back to my room, I was told that it was a tumor and that it looks malignant. And um, I just, I said, okay, we'll talk about it tomorrow. I just felt in my heart, I felt this is going to be a primary brain tumor. They came in and said it's a glioma. And I said, oh no, no, that's the worst one. And she said, not necessarily. It could be a two. I was told you could continue your pregnancy if it's a two. And I said, what if it's a three or a four? And she said, we throw the kitchen sink at it. And it was a four.
Before she could fully comprehend her diagnosis, Caroline was forced to make a heart-wrenching decision.
When you hear that news and you're still like, well, is there any other way to get around this? They wouldn't be able to treat me if I kept the baby. I could take chemo after I had the baby, but I still, at this point, when I was diagnosed, I was exactly 20 weeks. It was the same week as my 20-week scan. The scan was perfect. And I went and met with the fetal medicine and genetics and all of this, and tried to see if there's any way they could take my baby out sooner. No. And the radiation would be too far away. If I were to have the baby, they would not even do the radiation because it was too far from the surgery. But I was encouraged to have a termination because they felt like they needed to get that radiation as soon as possible. And I needed to get on chemo as soon as possible. And that way I could extend my life to maybe a year. The prognosis for glioblastoma is about a year and a half. It's usually 6 months to a year and a half. And so they didn't know if I would actually survive the pregnancy. I scheduled my termination. That was a 2 day procedure, and had my termination in 21 weeks. Making that choice and knowing that I might not even live a year, and just the hardest thing was definitely the abortion combined with my other baby at home. She was only 22 months. She won't remember me. That was my biggest concern was her not remembering who I am. Yeah, so those two moments were definitely the hardest thing. I was afraid of leaving my daughter, but I was not afraid of dying. And if it weren't for my daughter, I probably would have been not as worked up.
Caroline's fight continued with no time to pause.
They had to get it in as soon as possible. So the night I came home from my termination at night on a Monday night, and I had to be back to be fit for my radiation mask the next morning. It was really fast. And I did 6 weeks of chemo radiation combined. And then I was told that they wanted to do a year of high dose chemo. It would be 5 days on, 23 days off for a year. But I only made it 6 months because my platelets wouldn't take it anymore. I had radiation scheduled at 7:40 in the morning, Monday through Friday, and we got up, got in the car. We listened to a glioblastoma podcast on the way there, just trying to learn more, and that was it. For 6 weeks. Fatigue was the worst part for me. I lost my hair not from the chemo, but from the radiation. I got a really crazy radiation haircut. I lost my taste for a lot of different things that I used to like. Um, and different smells. Um, yeah, and then, the nausea, constipation from the chemo. The chemo was not as difficult, especially that lower chemo was not as difficult on me as I imagined it would be. Um, the higher dose is what got me for that. The Optune, that was 1 month. That was a wearable device. So after I shaved my head, I had something attached to my head, and you had to um, shave your head every day to get all the prickles off, and then um, put these electrodes on your head like stickies, and wear it all day. And came with a little backpack. So it was little stimulation for the brain. Was very obviously not going back to work. So I didn't even close my own office. The main thing in my life that I wanted was to be with my baby, my girl that was already here. And, just keep the nanny here as long as possible so she could take care of her and I can be here, um, just to see them, even if I can't really help with anything. I do remember, like, in the beginning, um, my goal every day was to get out of bed and walk.
Then, Caroline finally got encouraging news.
My original neuro, her idea was you have no evidence of disease right now. My tumor was not showing up. It was either no evidence of disease or stable or unremarkable, whatever it was. So I was getting every other month MRIs, and she said, if you want to take this time to just take off, heal, and then we'll continue the MRI every other month. And when your recurrence happens, you will be able to go back on that chemo. And so let my body heal and then return to it because my body was really responsive to the chemo. I said to the doctor, if I'm doing this, I'm going to be a 5-year survivor because 5% of patients, the whole statistically, that's a hard one to say now, 5% makes it to 5 years. And I said, I'm going to be in that 5%. And she was like, no. And I said, no, I'm going to be in that 5%. And so I have just said that every day. Having terminal cancer has been a blessing and a curse at the same time. I live for each day now. It was interesting because I had a lot of trauma growing up, and I feel like I've been a survivor my whole life. I had really bad anxiety, and now I don't have that kind of anxiety anymore because I have gone through like the hardest thing I could ever do in my life. And now I'm like, oh, I can do anything. The world does not scare me anymore.